G'day there ladies and gents of the internet, I am the Braveheart Aussie and welcome to a journey in world building. This is our second setting deep dive video exploring the moon of Koton and the Koton Independent Republic. Last episode we explored the key facts and technical attributes of the moon and set the scene with our lore episode of the initial moments of the invasion by the Galador hegemony. This time we're going to be exploring the society and economy of Koton. However, unlike previous setting deep dives, we're going to be exploring these facets of the world before the invasion and at the time of the Dark Diaspora. So we have a lot to cover today, so let's dive in. The moon was settled in the 24th century after 100 years of terraforming. This terraforming resulted in a broadly habitable planet, and settlement was from Bridgehead Station residents as well as through open call to other interplanet planets and major regional powers. The initial population numbered approximately 250,000 people. In the early 26th century, or approximately 100 years before the Dark Diaspora, Koton was one of the most prosperous colonies in the galaxy with a population of in excess of 85 million. It had a stable and growing population and represented one of the largest concentrations of people with higher socioeconomic standards above that of Lost Earth before the War of Cataclysm. Economic prosperity of the world was founded on its orbital and later deep space industries, which were initially founded during the terraforming process. This gave Koton an economic edge over its competitors, which themselves had to evolve from terrestrial economies before expanding into space. A key industry prior to the Hegemony War was autonomous pod manufacturing, which Koton had quickly taken over from Old Sol as the Diaspora's principal manufacturer of this ubiquitous interstellar transport vehicle. This core competitive edge underpinned interplanetary mining, aerospace technology development, low-G medical manufacturing, and custom freighter and merchant ship production as well. One sector that was not pursued was that of military and defense materials. This reflected the comparatively peaceful nature of the northwest corridor of the Diaspora at the time of the elevation of Koton outside of basic anti-piracy capabilities. And by this time, Lost Serion, both before and after their integration into the Tarvan Covenant, had established itself as the primary weapons manufacturing hub in the galaxy. The settlement of Koton principally focused on the elevated and comparatively flat rocky plateaus that dominated much of the moon's landscape. These plateaus housed the initial settlement and communities, which later evolved into a number of sprawling metropolis across the planet's surface, often covering a number of interconnected plateaus with expansive bridges and anti-gravity platforms bridging across myriad of gorges and canyons. By comparison, the lowlands of the planet, which were characterized by swampy marshlands, were home to a significantly smaller number of settlements akin to farming and fishing villages. These agricultural communities were intentionally maintained as less technologically focused, so that the lifestyle would appeal to those seeking a more rural setting. Nevertheless, these areas remained highly technologically advanced, with automated harvesting and technologically advanced farming and monitoring techniques employed extensively alongside more rural and rustic townships. The cities prior to the war were highly advanced urban centres with extensive public transport, well-planned streetscapes, below average levels of poverty and crime, and a strong social support system. This formed something of a safety net, which was part of a broader capitalist social contract model in the Koton's economy. Taxes were maintained at a moderately high level, though value for money investments in critical and enabling infrastructure by merit-based bureaucracy meant that taxation was viewed favourably, or at least understood by the general population and major mercantilists alike to be a beneficial contribution to the greater good. Education levels before the war were some of the highest in the Diaspora, with the Koton Institute of Applied Scientists, or KIAS, specifically acting as a major diaspora-wide research organisation of note, while the Koton qualified scientists and researchers were commonly found on stations across the galaxy. Koton employed a constitutionally focused democratic republican model of governance, with a bicameral parliamentary structure balancing both competing population density and spatial distribution factors in elected representation. The Republican model also included a strong executive branch of governance, with powers split between the Chancellor as the head of state with exterior powers, appointed by Parliament from an apolitical merit-based criteria list, and a directly elected Premier that had authority over interior matters. This division of power between both the executive and the legislative, as well as between the Chancellor and the Premier, proved highly effective in Koton in balancing the numerous needs of the comparatively large and affluent domestic population, with the importance of trade and interstellar relations to Koton's export-oriented, techno-advanced economy. Koton was broadly self-sufficient for basic foodstuffs prior to that of the war, with introduced and modified rice crops and green leafy vegetables forming the foundation of a more Eastern Asian diet, complemented with aquaculture and poultry. Despite this, luxury foodstuffs were a major import for Koton, with overall prosperity of the moon meaning the use of artificial food substitutes, such as carbo blocks and protein strips, was almost non-existent. The onset of the Hegemony War in 2524, or approximately 200 years after Koton was settled, fundamentally altered the status of the Moon and the Republic from that of a genuine economic power of regional and galactic significance to a lower order colony world. The war has seen over 90% of the population of Koton killed or fleeing from the conflict, especially after the initial onset of the war. That and suppressed fertility rates has meant that at the time of the Dark Diaspora, Koton's population has shrunk to only 6.2 million people. The majority of the lives lost occurred halfway through the war with the hegemony, when the Galador forces, in an attempt to end the war, used anti-gravity bombs as weapons of mass destruction to obliterate and destroy much of the planet's surface, particularly around the capital. This resulted in a diaspora-wide outcry and saw both Compact and Genfarian governments move from positions of neutrality to providing secondary support to the Republic as unlikely allies. The scale of the attack was so great that several parts of the planet's surface continued to experience severe gravitational anomalies, including the remnants of the equatorial plateau on which the capital Thran was placed, which is now fragmented and dotted by floating islands of the destroyed cityscape. The Republic's governance, as defined by its constitution, was formally suspended in the early days of the war. The Republic now functions as an emergency military dictatorship, with the Supreme Commander of the Republic's Joint Forces Command assuming executive, legislative, and judicial powers. Martial law is in force, and the domestic economy that continues to exist only functions to serve the war effort. All orbital and deep space economic and industrial capacity has been destroyed, either by hegemony forces or by the Republic itself. Only low orbital defense platforms and anti-FTL defense capabilities now exist, and serve to act as a bulwark to prevent further large-scale bombing and surface invasion by the hegemony. Yet hegemony forces continue to breach the defense halo with special forces and small strike groups to attack Republican defensive positions on the planet. Quality of living for residents who remain on the planet, including those born during the war era, is well below that of pre-cataclysm levels on Lost Earth, and is one of the lowest now of any planet with a population of more than 1 million people. Planetary food production is minimal and linked to underground algae farms and emergency and artificial rations. However, a large expat community of former Koton residents and their descendants now live across the diaspora, and these groups are a major source of currency, supplies, and equipment for the war effort. This typically involves hiring a free flagger vessel to function as a blockade runner and deliver supplies to the surface. Koton forces stationed outside of the system also operate as a pseudo-paramilitary organisation, using terrorist and guerrilla tactics to strike hegemony forces across the northwest quadrant of the galaxy. This has actually included attacks on Galador itself, as well as indirect and direct support for unrest, disobedience, and revolt on other Galador holdings across the region. At the time of the Diaspora, the Hegemony War has ground down to something of a stalemate, with Koton forces unable to operate outside of their planetary surface, while the Hegemony forces lack the capability and power to breach the now extensive network of orbital defense platforms. This phase of the war has become known as the Forever Siege, with both sides recognizing that any change in the status quo is likely to reflect the intervention or impact of outside factors. And that is where we're going to leave things today. A bigger episode again, and next week will be even bigger as we explore the terrors of the world, go in more depth into that of the war, as well as other terror-related planetary features, such as the impacts of the floating islands, as well as the lightning strikes we mentioned in the previous episode. If you are enjoying this new mini-series setting deep dive, make sure you go and like this episode and subscribe to the channel. Also head over to the Discord and join in on the fun over there. Finally, I do have a Patreon for anyone that would like to support the channel and help us as we look to approach 50,000 subscribers over the next 6 months. But that is it for today. Thank you so much. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and may the journey continue.
Hey!